minutes thinking about it. And we are officially live. There you go. Just like that. Really, really easy. So I'm sure we might get comments throughout, and hello people who are watching, or if you're watching this back, because this will be live on my channel afterwards. Hello, it's me, Chels. I'm back again, and I'm joined by none other than EJ Doble. Am I saying that right?
Doble.
Is it Doble? I've been saying
everyone
wrong.
gets it wrong. It's fine. Everyone gets it wrong.
And do you want to go by EJ or do you want to go by Ethan? Do you have a preference?
Entirely your choice. Entirely your choice.
So we already have, of course, hello. Always. So this Tufty is someone who constantly, he's a very big supporter and he's an amazing person in the indie community. So I'm not surprised that he's done up, to be fair. So today the general gist is to obviously talk about your books. We have obviously been reading, I've got mine next to me still with my tabs in, none other than The Fangs of War, which is this the first book that you ever read?
Yes,
Wrote?
First book.
I have slept, I promise. Yeah,
first book.
Amazing. And I think I read somewhere, did you write it on your gap year? Was it in between uni or was it in between college and uni?
It was. I wrote it sporadically over 2 years from the age of about 17.
That's pretty good going, because it's very good.
Yeah, and then it all kind of got finalized, and I kind of wrapped my head around it on the second half of my gap year, from between finishing school and university. My gap year wasn't very eventful because this big thing called COVID happened and yada yada.
I don't know what that is. Just a little blip.
It still baffles me. Yeah, and then I got it all edited and sorted and finalized, and then released it during my first year at uni. So although I'm no longer in uni, the book still remains and the series still remains. So that's all.
The book does still remain. It's published. It's official. No, so that is your first one, and I do know that I've started to read, and I don't think you've published anything else in it yet. Is it Crescent Moon? I'm not very good at remembering overall book collection.
Yeah, Crescent Moon is currently the only book in the series. However, there will be a sequel. The sequel will be in the new year, and it is my next project after my current project. So that is on the horizon.
Yeah, is it because Crescent Moon was, by comparison, a shorter novel? Or was
yes, very different.
Would you class it as a novella? I wouldn't, because it's its own separate entity, and it was very enjoyable actually when I read it. I really enjoyed the whole almost like philosophical element to it. I thought that was really intriguing, and I wasn't sure, if I'm honest, whether that was going to be something I gelled with. But the way you did it was really, and I'm not just saying this because you're on my channel, but it was very, very well done, and I really enjoyed it. So how did you, was that a separate thing rattling through your head when you were writing Fangs, or?
I studied a lot of philosophy when I was in school. I've always had an interest in it. I read quite a lot of Aristotle, Plato, and then in later years I've read Schopenhauer and Albert Camus and other philosophers of that kind of style, and quite a few of them did fiction books based on certain ideas that they had about life, death, about morals and everything else. And I thought I'd have my own swing at it. I've always had a big fascination with the meaning of life and the purpose in the world and stuff like that. And so it kind of just materialized from there. I always wanted there to be a sage-like character. I always wanted to be in a desert. And I felt like adding a coming of age story to it as well then helped with the understanding of the concept in the book, but also was another trope that people could engage with and, kind of associate with better. It was a fun little book to write, and I really enjoyed it. And I'm really looking forward to the sequel.
Are you planning on it being about the same length, or are you expanding?
I think looking at my little notes above me, I've got a whiteboard above my desk.
Very organized. I like that.
Looking at my little noteboard, it's probably going to be slightly longer than Crescent Moon, not by much, but it's going to go around the same kind of ideas. Rather than looking at the meaning of life, it's going to look for what our purpose is and what we should strive towards.
Right. Okay.
Similar setup, but the stakes are slightly higher, and obviously you now have Mayala as a grown woman, and she has to kind of navigate a lot of different feelings, especially with a family and her newfound responsibilities. But I won't give away too much for that.
Yeah.
But that series is a trilogy, so there will be three.
Okay. It's very interesting. Yeah, I did really enjoy that first book. To be fair, I think I rattled through it quite quick for me. Rattled through it quite quickly. Yes. But going back to obviously the book that we are all here for, Fangs of War. Dufty has asked a very good question. Like, how many years had the book been rattling around in your head prior to you finishing it off, or even starting it? Really?
Do we want the long answer or the short answer?
Whichever you prefer. This is all about you.
Let's throw a long answer. The book started as a English writing project when I was 14. And it was only a prologue, and it was about a mysterious figure on a beach who found a crown. And that was the grand total. My English teacher said it was over descriptive and difficult to read. I took half of her advice and made it easier to read. Did not take away any of the description.
No, I think your English teacher may need to reread it now.
Yes, it's gone through a lot of edits, especially that first bit. But that first bit then formed into the prologue. And then the prologue and the first 70 pages were written all in one big chunk just after my GCSEs, so between 16 and 17. And I didn't write it for a while. I kind of left it. I worked on a few other little projects. I was writing a pirate book at one point. And then I looked through a lot of my old writings, and I had about 4 different books, and they were all to do with different characters. There was a character with a skeleton face and a big cowl, who I'm sure, having read it, some people know who I'm talking about. There was this idea of a higher power with conduits on the real world. There was an idea of demons and the darker entities in the world communicating with mortals and making poor choices and stuff like that. And it all kind of came together. And I then, in about 3 months, I wrote about 300 pages.
Yeah.
And then it was a hard task to get through the last bit of the book when I was initially writing it. I initially wrote it and then kind of let it settle again. I didn't think it would go anywhere. And then I half-heartedly tried to get it traditionally published, and that didn't pan out. But with post-COVID and money being tight and publishers not really entirely comfortable taking on new authors, I completely understood that a lot of their comments were, good book, not at the moment. So
that's not bad feedback.
I took that on the chin. Although they did want to get rid of Marcus and Savanta. That was a running theme, which I flatly refused because I love them both.
Yeah.
And then it was actually my partner who suggested to me, well, why don't you try and self-publish it? And I had no idea about it. No idea what self-publishing was like. And then 6 months later, it was out on Amazon.
Amazing.
So yeah, it had humble little origins, and it was very much a case of using old work and developing current work and just snowballing slowly into something that was a finished product. I recently described it as my little craft book of crayons and craft glue, because it is just kind of this slapdash thing to me. It's my first slightly rickety, slightly rough-edged book, but I love it. So that's what
I don't think it comes across as that, though, to be fair. I have to, I read a lot of indie. That is what I try and do a lot with my channel. And I do think, like, the minute I started reading the book, I was like, this feels like it could be traditionally published. And I think that's the amazing thing as well with indie at the minute. And I've had this conversation with many indie authors of, since COVID, since probably just before COVID, indie publishing has just skyrocketed, and it's got so much better in its reputation. It's no longer that, oh, these are books that traditionally published or publishing houses won't touch. It's more the fact that they can't.
It's a choice.
Or they don't have the time, and authors actually actively choose to do this. And I can imagine it's quite stressful though.
Yeah. I wouldn't give it up for the world. And now that I've chosen to self-publish the books that I have, I'm glad I made that decision. I'm glad effectively I've put my foot in the door and I got the ball rolling. And if it means that in later life, the books
Someone
get picked up by traditional publishers or anything like that, then happy days. But as far as this initial step, I am so happy that I did it self-published. I know a lot of other authors similar who have said, it was a perfect choice for them at the time.
Well, exactly, because you're putting your work out there, and with traditionally published, one, you've got your control, or you've got more control over your cover, your publishing time. It does mean that obviously I had an interview a month or so ago with Stephen Orion, who is a traditionally published author with Angry Robot, and he says that the thing he likes about traditionally published is that he has someone there to do his edits and to just kind of keep him on track, almost like someone to check in with, and someone who can turn around and be like, that sounds like a really good idea, but it probably wouldn't do well right now, maybe shelve it, come back to it in a year's time, which I think is really helpful. But I also really appreciate, and it puts me in awe, to be fair, of indie authors such as yourselves just going, well, this is the story I want to write, this is the story I want to put out, and I'm going to put it out and see who it finds. And I think it's very admirable, to be fair.
Well, at the end of the day, whether the book is a popular success now or whether it gets an average reception or whatever else, at some point, the interest and what people are driven towards through their literature might swing towards something like The Fangs of War, and it might have a resurgence later in life, or the Crescent Moon might blow up in 2030, but we don't know. But the fact is, it's written and it's sorted, and it's there for people to find. And I like that. It's its own little exploration that you do have to do a bit more digging, because naturally self-published authors don't have as you said, the wherewithal to actually do the full edits and the promotions and everything else. We do what we can, but it's things like this and people like you who give us that extra little push. So
that's the whole point, to be fair. This is probably my favorite part of my channel. It's not really where I set out to go to, if I'm honest. I started this channel just to talk about books, and indie publishing kind of found me, if I'm honest. And I wouldn't change it either, because I've met some incredible people, I've read some incredible books, and I like being able to be like, here, not have my channel, but have a platform on my channel to promote yourself. That's a lot, to be fair, because you're still, this makes me feel really old. You're not very old.
No, I'm only 22 at the end of the year.
Exactly. And you've achieved quite a lot, to be fair. Obviously, the readathon, we read the first book of Fangs. We're reading the sequel starting from the 24th, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. So that'll be pretty interesting. Have you seen any really cool uptake since doing this readathon?
A certain amount of it. It's kind of built throughout. Because I went through a little bit of a lull over the past few months. There hasn't been a lot going on, but over the past 3 weeks, my sales and my Kindle Unlimited reads and stuff have just kind of naturally done this. So it's come at a perfect time. There's definitely been more interest, and I know a lot of people who have read The Fangs of War, who've got the Horns of Grief now from a sale, and have said, we're going to now get involved and see what it's all about. It's a perfect opportunity.
Well, exactly.
The sequel is a very different beast. And
I'm really looking forward to it, to be fair.
yeah, I had a rough relationship with it, but I still think it's one of the favorite things I've ever written. And yeah, it's an interesting book.
Have you announced, I cannot remember off the top of my head, have you announced how long this series is going to be? Is it also going to be a trilogy, or have you got more books planned?
This series is in total 8 books.
Jeez.
That is
Plotted out.
5 main books, a prequel, and 2.5 books.
Okay.
I call it Cahilling,
Yes.
because that's the best explanation I can give it, best term I can give
it
it.
is.
But yeah, there will be a 2.5, there will be a 3.5. So overall, a span of 8 books.
And how long do you reckon that'll take you to get out? Have you got like a timescale in mind? I'm
It'll
planning my TBR here.
probably take up my life for the next 5 or 6 years, probably. That's my expectation.
Yeah.
But as it stands, it will probably end up being near enough a new installment every year.
Okay. So you are following, even though you're self-publishing, you are following a traditional published scale.
Yes.
Or timeline, essentially.
And that's not including Grimdark Fairy Tales or the Crescent Moon series. That's additional.
How do you motivate yourself to carry on?
Spare time, and I'm not a big fan of TV. That is
We need to
basically
swap,
the only answer.
because this is what's hindering me at the minute, is that I've got re-addicted to like Friends and How I Met Your Mother.
Oh no, those are long
Yeah.
series.
Yeah. But I can also nap to them because I've seen them multiple times, so take that as you will. Are you I asked this to quite a few people, are you a pantser or are you a planner? Because with this many books, have you actually planned what's going into every book, or are you just like, meh, we'll see what happens?
Very good question.
Thanks.
Of the total, if I include the Fangs of War and the Horns of Grief as 100%, I planned probably a quarter of it.
Wow.
I planned the last 10% of the Fangs of War, and I planned the last 15% of the Horns of Grief. Everything else apart from that is completely ad hoc. The Crescent Moon got chapter outlines, but it didn't get any explanation for the actual book itself.
Okay.
And Gold Lock and Key was completely, I just ran with that. Which is why a few people who have given it reviews, their main critique is this went in some random directions. And I'm thinking, I know, I had no idea what I was doing when I was writing it. So if it's coherent enough that you enjoyed it, happy days.
How do you have a way of reining yourself back in? Obviously, if you're just running with it, if you're planning the final 10% of certain books, you've obviously got to get to a certain point to get to that planned section. But who is reining you in to make sure it's fitting into a normal size book?
It was for the first book, it was my favorite bit of it, the fact that I could just run with it. But for the Horns of Grief, the reason why I have such a difficult relationship with that book is because that same strategy of pantsing it was my Achilles heel.
I can imagine.
Because then I wrote the book in 7 months. I then wrote the Crescent Moon in between, and then I went back to the book for editing with the plan of releasing it in 4 months, and then realized that I had to rewrite 2 entire storylines for the last 350 pages of the book because I hadn't planned them.
You didn't know where you wanted to go.
And so I completely wiped it. I wiped half of the last 2/3 of the book and completely rewrote it over those 4 months. And so, although I love the idea of just running away with the book, book 3 is going to have so many notes that I'm going to feel flooded and sick with the idea of the book by the end of it, probably. But so long as it creates a coherent final product, I'm absolutely fine.
Well, that is true.
But yeah, it's just I've never been a planner, not with books. Everything
Says
else
the
went up.
person with a whiteboard over the top of his computer.
This is me learning. This is my mistakes. Yeah, this was post Horns of Grief chaos when I finally decided to get my act together. But yeah,
I mean, you're a published author now. Now is as good a time
I've
as
got to
any.
keep everything on the straight and narrow. Yeah, I got to keep myself in check.
Well, that is true. This is everyone.
It's been a long learning curve, especially the sequel. I'm more than happy with where the end product is, and I love the direction the story's going in, and I love the opportunity it's given me to write a 2.5, because that was not initially planned, but I like the fact it's given me the opportunity to do so. But from now on, I will plan most books that I write, and I will leave my little, sidewinding ways and my pantsing ways to little side projects that I write here and there. Not to anything serious.
I think this is a really interesting question. With such an ambitious number of books, does changing interest concern you? What I mean is that if it's something you want to go on to do something else, 8 books is a heck of a commitment.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that's why the idea of me taking on side projects has been quite appealing, because as I'm sure you know, The Crescent Moon is a very, very, very different book.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And so it draws from me a different kind of writer, and I gauge in it in a different way. It's the reason why the sequel has taken so long to write, is because I finished The Horns of Grief, and then I wrote another grimdark book, and I'm writing another grimdark book, and then I wrote another grimdark book, and it's just because I felt that was where I was. Whereas I'm getting to the end of the current project that I'm writing, and I'm feeling a bit grimdarked out. So now it's nice to jump ship and then write something a little bit different. And that's what's quite cathartic as well about grimdark fairy tales. The other stuff that I'm writing is that's just quick, easy books that I write, and I just spill my brain out for a bit, have a little refresh, and then go back to my main project. And I think as far as changing interest concerns me, my belief is if I create characters that I love and I'm interested in, it won't lose interest. If I do start to lose interest in the main series, I'm doing something wrong.
Are you just going to start killing off characters?
You haven't read the end of the book yet,
I'm
have
getting
you?
a bit bored. I'm going to kill everyone.
If you haven't read the end of the Fangs War yet, have you?
Not yet, no. You're just going to kill everyone. Is there going to be no one left? We've still got a second book to read.
Those who have read it and are watching this, you know what I'm thinking. And I'm sorry.
Are you going to get a shouty message from me shortly to be like, why have you done this?
I might get a few shouty messages, but we'll see.
Well, you'll enjoy that later. That's something to look forward to for you.
Probably deserve it.
Do you keep notes, or is this what you're starting to plan to do? Are you going to start keeping notes like a reference or encyclopedia, so you have something to refer back to? Are you going to have a murder board, essentially?
Murder board. That's a very good idea. I don't currently kill off enough characters to warrant a murder board, but
what I mean by this is, have you read The Ruin of Kings, that series by Jen Lyons? So how she does it, I've got no idea, because that whole series of 5 books, I was pretty much baffled for the whole 5 books, and how she kept everything in check, I've got no idea. So what me and Lisa and my friend Kate referred to it as was a murder board, as in like you're tracking an investigation with the red lines that go between everything. You don't necessarily have to be killing people, but just to like keep like, this person's related to this person's with this person, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
that might be something you need to look at.
I've had to do that a hell of a lot more now that the book is established, because I realized that characters have quite consistent emotions, and that to convey consistent emotions in a proper way without it sounding too false or immature, I have to make a murder board, basically. So in answer to the question, no, up until this point I haven't. But going forward, I absolutely will. And again, book 3 in the series will have a completely different approach, and it will be a very dedicated process. And I imagine that actually the planning process, because it's going to be a big book, is going to be about 700, 800 pages. Yeah, it's going to be quite a big book.
You are starting to car hit it.
I know I am. It's
you're gonna have like
I tried to think what 4 and 5 are going to look like.
I don't know.
But
1,000 pages, please.
I don't think I will ever. I think I will get bored by that point. So I hope it doesn't get to that point. I respect authors who can. I'm not one of those people.
No, that's fair enough.
But yeah, it's definitely going to have to require a lot more planning. And I imagine the planning phase of book 3 will take up the majority or quite a lot of the time with planning, writing, editing overall.
So do you do it all yourself?
Yes.
Obviously, you write yourself, but your editing, your covers.
Covers I pay people to do, but that's the only extra bit that I pay people to do.
Okay.
I've got a fantastic map artist from Ireland. I've got a fantastic cover designer from Italy. I've got another fantastic cover designer from California. I've got another fantastic cover designer from Brazil. So wide span of people. But they're all fantastic, and I've absolutely loved working with them. As a matter of fact, the next book in the Blood and Steel saga, I've actually dedicated to Diego, my illustrator, just purely because he's done a fantastic job.
Fair enough.
And yeah, but everything else outside of that, I do. I have a few people to do kind of like beta reading, I guess. But as far as the actual full structure of the book goes, really edited by me.
Wow.
So yeah.
So you really are, by the time you publish it and you ship it out, you really are like that booked out.
Yeah, I'm sick to death of the book. It's why I can't celebrate. When I publish a book, I cannot celebrate the book because I don't want to know about it. And then I have to promote it. Then I have to promote it and I have to tell people how amazing it is. And I can't think of anything worse at the time because it's a book I've dedicated my heart and soul to, but I'm so sick of it now.
Yeah, because you've read it I don't even want to think how many times you've probably read the books.
Yeah, they go through quite a few edits. Usually it's me trying to regain traction and stuff if I've been away from the book for like a week or so. Like the current project I'm writing is only short, but I have reread the first 5 chapters about 6 times so far.
Wow.
So hopefully by the end of it, it's quite polished. But yeah, I go through a lot of edits.
Yeah, I do not envy you for that part. I don't think I could do that, if I'm honest. But that's just like an attention thing for me. Apparently you should be sorry.
Yes, there we go. Yeah. That was probably one of my first slightly angry messages was from Rebecca Reeds. So yeah.
But at least like that must, as much as like angry messages are like, oh gosh, people are mad at me, it must still have like a really good feeling because you're making people feel things.
An elicited emotional reaction is a good thing.
Yes.
Always. And also, I believe that at the end of book 2, there's a certain amount of forgiveness for me as a writer. Not saying that will continue throughout the whole series, but at least for the first 2, there is I get my own redemption arc as a writer.
Right. We shall see when we read the next book.
Yeah.
Do you like reading chunky books? Is that a direction you lean instinctively in, as opposed to short, compact, tight little books?
I read bigger books, and that it doesn't put me off the size of a book necessarily. The size of a series puts me off.
Yes.
That being said, my favorite series of all time is 10 books long.
Which is
Shadows of the Act by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Yep. Not one I've read, but one I've heard of.
Series I read start to finish when I was between the ages of about 11 and 14, and stuck with me.
So we're carrying on with these like reading flexes. Like, I read all these books and I was really young. Sounds like a book prodigy over here.
I read a lot of books. I just love reading.
Yeah.
I've always loved reading and collecting books and having my own
Yeah.
little library and stuff like that.
Me too.
Yes, mine's there, and there's another 2 over there. Yeah, as far as reading bigger books goes, I struggle reading a paperback or a hardback of any significant size. It's one of the reasons I'm actually glad I've got a Kindle. I was never a Kindle person until I started getting through 400-page books in a week, which used to be an impossible task. It used to be that I would start 3 paperbacks at the start of the month, and I would just finish them all by the end of the month, and they were all about 400 pages long.
Yeah.
And I dedicate a horrific amount of time to it because I'm quite a slow reader. Yeah, Kindles make it a hell of a lot easier. I don't mind the length of a book. I think so long as you utilize the space properly, then a book can be any length. But I've read some massive books this year. I've read some tiny books this year, and I've enjoyed both of them equally. So it's and I write in a variety of different lengths. So I like to engage in all of them.
I don't have any favorites.
No, I don't have any favorites.
I probably do. Well, according to my tracking spreadsheet, it's like my key prime reading is between like 350 and 450 pages. They're just the books that apparently I read the most of, which by that means finish. Because if you don't know this about me, I read many books at the same time. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing.
So does that mean you have quite a lot of currently reading that are just
I've got like 23 on the go at the minute. Yeah, but I remember everything. It used to baffle my mum when I was a kid.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, I'm like that part of it. It's fine. The whole it's not. I've got lots currently reading because, okay, 1 or 2 of them will be because I forgot to take a bookmark out, but most of it is because I'm like, well, I don't really feel like reading that now. Let's find something new, and that nice fuzzy feeling you get when you start a new book. I'm constantly chasing that.
So you're quite a mood reader then?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
I am a mood reader when I am at, I don't know, probably my most stressed, I guess, or when I've got a lot going on, because I'm constantly like, well, I don't know what I'm in the mood for. But setting TBRs equally works well for me because I structure it and I take all of the choice out, if that makes sense. I'm like, well, you can only pick from these 5 books. Pick one of them.
I see.
So I have to
That's quite a good method to keep yourself, reined in.
I try. Doesn't always work.
She has 23 current reading books, but
yeah, that's future me's problem. When you have written the book, when it comes to the editing, how do you separate that in your mind? As you must have scenes or moments that you love that maybe have to go. I don't know actually how that works.
That kind of, again, I go back to the Horns of Grief and my experience with that. And I enjoyed both storylines that I had written, but there just wasn't a potency to them. And there were some scenes in there that I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
But it just all had to go. And I do completely agree that it's hard to separate between things that are necessary to take out and things that, I love this. But then again, I look at it more, I have to be ruthless, basically. And a lot of that goes in my initial reads when I read through it to then start the next bit, read through to start the next bit. As it cycles through, there will be some scenes and some chapters where I don't like the scene anymore, or something doesn't fit quite right. Entire thing goes, start again, move on.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can mean a restructuring of, 100 pages worth, but it happens. I consider myself fortunate that hasn't happened too many times. But when it has then happened, i.e. the Horns of Grief, it was quite a significant change. So it is hard to detach from it, but at the end of the day, I want the best product I possibly can, and that is my main focus. So that's how I can ruthlessly cut some of my favorite scenes from books. which is a tragedy in itself. But
no, that's fine. I do think it is very impressive how you are both the writer and the editor, because I think for a lot of authors, or I'd like to think, because I'm not one, I'd like to think for a lot of authors, you probably submit a book to an editor and they go, maybe we should take this out. And you go, not sure if I want to. This is probably more my favourite. But the fact that you can go through and almost pick apart your own work, like, that's very impressive, actually. Is that something that you've always been able to do, or is that something that you've learned through writing?
If I'm completely honest, it was something I did more for financial necessity and limitations rather than actually, because when I published The Fangs of War, I'd only quite recently got more hours at my current job, and I didn't have a lot of income, and it meant that me paying someone to edit my work was complete no-go.
Right.
And so I admit that, you know, part of it was financial limitations. I wasn't able to pay someone. But also I blame my English teacher, which is, you know, I appreciate her. I appreciate what she tried to do. It frustrated the hell out of me, but it meant that I can now do what I do. And that is that I would edit through and green pen creative writing work 4 times, 5 times over, and I bring it back to her. And then eventually it would get to the point where she says, yeah, this is really good. But only after 4 or 5 times. And so now I approach this stuff with the same head. I am my worst critic. And I know full well that a different pair of eyes would probably pick up some stuff that is still in the books that people read through and maybe question the choice, or, you know, wonder if things could be worded better and stuff like that, you know. And that's purely because I've edited my own work, and that, you know, there's going to be that bias and that imbalance. But I try and do as best as I can, and I like to think that my final product is readable and enjoyable. And if it ever was a serious issue, then I would obviously get a proper editor and do all that stuff. But for now, I'm more than happy to edit my own work and just see how it goes. And yeah, just take it as it goes.
Well, that seems to be going quite well, to be fair. From
I
having read your work, I wouldn't go through it and be like, oh, needs a bit more editing. Which is probably, well, I think that is a compliment in itself. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's pretty impressive that you can actually go through and do that, because obviously there are people out there who do that as a job. So would you ever consider doing that as a job on top of what you do? Or
I think I would be completely booked out if I not only wrote and edited my own work, but also then edited someone else's. Theoretically, I would love to do it. I'd love to edit people's work and, you know, go over with a magnifying glass and, you know, give to people the best product that their creative, you know, their fantastic creative mind has made. But if I was to do both, I think I would lose my mind.
Quite possibly, because you'd just be staring at screens or pages or whatever format it comes to you in.
And it'd all start merging, and I'd give comments saying, by the way, Kavara shouldn't say this. Oh, no, sorry, wrong character. And then write, you know, Mr. Smith in my book, and no, that's not the correct character right there. And it'd all just mesh together, and I'd probably be sat somewhere just with my head in my hands with notes all everywhere. And
at least you would be writing your notes.
At least I would be writing my notes. I would have learned to write my notes. It would have been in a moment of complete mental breakdown, but I would have written my notes.
Oh, we'll all get there eventually. Speaking of Kavara, I've noticed that you name your characters on letters of the alphabet. Is this a deliberate choice to help the reader separate the characters from each other, or is there another idea behind this?
I have never noticed that.
Well, there you go. Someone has.
It's probably a subconscious thing. But now that I think about it, yes, you are completely correct. And characters that, that is completely correct. I've never thought that before. It's probably a subconscious thing that I do, where I think, okay, how do I define the characters? Because a lot of them are quite morally grey, and a lot of them are military people. So I don't want them all to blend into the same kind of mesh.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's probably a subconscious thing that I pick letters and then assign them to characters and stuff like that.
That's probably a good thing, to be fair.
Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out and giving me credit for something that I completely did at random. I appreciate
on purpose.
I will forever now claim that I did it on purpose, and I have that extra level of thought.
Tavish naming observation for the win.
An excellent observation, one that I didn't even make myself. So,
well, I do agree, to be fair. The amount of, especially high fantasy, grimdark fantasies that you read where a lot of the names are, for a start, obviously not your normal Tom, Dave, so they're already sometimes a little bit difficult to pronounce, and then they all sound the same in your head, and then they all kind of do the same thing, and especially for people like me who actually come on and review them, I'm then like, oh, I can't remember what this character's name is because they all mesh, and it's probably good that you can separate them. Whether or not you meant to do it is irrelevant. It helps the reader,
it's our feature.
and that is the main thing. Oh, Siri is trying to talk to me now. Feels left out. So with your whole process, how do you start? Is there a start? Is it that you're one of those authors that kind of gets an idea and goes, "Oh, I'll sit on that for a bit," or you're like, "Oh, I immediately need to write this down"? How do you start a project?
That is a good question. The Fangs of War, as I said, Fangs of War kind of rolled into one. And I still don't know what book 4 and 5 will look like, but I know vaguely what I want them to do, and so that's about as far as I get with it. Like the third book in the Crescent Moon trilogy, I know vaguely which characters I want involved. I know what the main question will be. I don't know what it's structured like at the moment. Bits and pieces like that. But as far as a completely fresh idea goes, I believe my current total of ideas that I have for books is, this isn't series, this is books total in a series of various ideas. It's about 46.
Wow, so your to be written pile is like my to be read pile.
Massive. Yeah. I again, whether these books actually see the light of day, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas, but a lot of them just start off with different concepts and ideas. I'm the kind of person who will take the dog for a walk or go for a shower, or someone will mention a word that then sticks in my head, and then I think about other things. Someone mentioned planets, and then I came up with like planetary rotation magic, and then that became a trilogy. And then I watched another film, watched Tenet, and I came up with a time reverse fantasy quadrilogy set in a desert and stuff like that, just from watching that film.
Really like the desert.
Yeah, I love the desert. I hate sand. I love the desert. And yeah, I don't. It's hard to say a process.
Yeah.
But it's a case of I will roughly map out what the series looks like. I will then magnify the first book. I will then write chapter 1, and I will decide where it goes from there. And probably by the end of the first book, the rest of the series plans are completely pointless. Book 2 of the Blood and Steel saga did not go how I thought it would go after writing book 1, before writing book 1, and after starting book 2. It went in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
Book 3, I have a more solid idea, but that's because so much has been built up from the first 2 books that it almost writes its own plot.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as establishing a new idea or a new series, it is a complete Hail Mary, and then just seeing what kind
happens.
of the fallout is.
Okay, so with that in mind, then what is your process to get your idea from your whiteboard to actually drafting it or writing it or however you do it? How do you pick? Like, how did you pick that you were going to write Gold Lock and Key, or how did you do that?
It's actually a bit of self-care. I think is the
Okay.
best way I can explain it. I like having a lot of cards in play all at once. It keeps my brain active, it keeps me happy, and it keeps my creative energies going. And it was, again, the reason why I wrote Gold Lock and Key was because after finishing The Haunts of Grief, I still wanted to write something grimdark fantasy, but I didn't know what my next book in that series would be because I was still trying to work out what the 2.5 was.
Yeah.
And for those, when it comes out, which is at some point next year, everyone can thank my partner because she was the one who took it from a tiny side story I was going to tell in a short story at some point in the next 5 years to a 260-page book, which it currently is, and it's written. So that's the thing.
Bish bash bosh.
Yeah. Again,
you are trying to be the next Sanderson, aren't you? With you just churning stuff out.
I'd love to. But again, I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to get judged for this. I've never read a Brandon Sanderson book.
No judgment here. I have them sat on my shelf.
I've read part of the first Mistborn book,
The Final Empire.
Like that's the one. I didn't.
You didn't like it?
Yeah, I like books that are more descriptive. And
fair enough. Which makes sense because of the way that your books are written. They are very descriptive.
Yeah, like if I was to read, but then again, I don't like books that are overly descriptive, and I like that weird middle ground. I like Joe Abercrombie, for example.
Yes.
That's an author who kind of sits nicely in the middle of action and character development, which Sanderson excels at, and then the more descriptive elements that are perhaps not as prevalent in his books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to be the next Sanderson and just throw books out left, right, and centre. I'd love to have a year of Doble. That'd be,
yes.
Write 4 books in secret and then throw them out at everyone.
By the sounds of it, you've got enough ideas to do that. You just possibly don't have enough time.
Yeah, no, enough time, enough brain space. I completely forgot what the initial question was that you asked.
How do you? Oh gosh. How do you plan it? No. Yeah. How does your original idea basically become the next thing you're going to write?
Yeah, it was. It's a lot of it is to do with timing and necessity and filling a time schedule. To be fair, because I set myself time schedules. I know how long books are likely to take to write and then to edit and then to release and where I'm going to source cover from. And after The Haunts of Grief, I wanted a small project that didn't kind of run away and, take up too much time and stuff like that. So again, I was talking to my partner and she reads certain romance retellings of fairy tales and stuff like that. And I've read them, they're really, really cool. And I thought, has anyone done a grimdark version of that? And not that I know of. So I decided, screw it, I'll write mine. And then Gold Lock and Key was born. And I came with the basic blurb and then just wrote from there.
Yeah.
And then after that, I kind of settled and I thought, right, what's the next book? Book 2.5, let's write it. Current project, let's write it. And then I know I'm kind of running out of grimdark. So then I'll jump to a different book idea. And it might be that I finish the Crescent Moon trilogy, and then all I've got left is Blood and Steel Saga and Grimdark Fairy Tales. That's a lot of dark fantasy.
Yeah.
So then I might go, screw it, I'll write a completely different book as well in between and just publish that at some point. Just to get, at the end of the day, it keeps me going. And it diversifies what I write to then make the whole process easier overall. Because otherwise I'm in a position where I just stop, start.
Yeah.
I've heard of authors getting stuck on writing a book for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Not really getting the energy or the drive going again. And so to avoid that, I keep as many cards in play as I possibly can and just go with that.
I think that's also quite, I think I've been saying impressive quite a lot this interview, and I'm very sorry, but I'm also kind of not. I do genuinely think it's very impressive that you can write in so many different genres. I know by the sounds of it, at the minute, predominantly it is grimdark, But the fact that you can go to other things, or you've got interests in writing other things, like, I think that really diversifies you and diversifies your audience as well. Because in theory, if you're writing books that would appeal to me as a grimdark fantasy reader, and then you write something else that might not necessarily be in my general wheelhouse, but I see that you've written it, I'm like, oh, I like this author, I'll try it anyways, and it will work vice versa. So in theory, it's a very good thing to do. And if it's keeping you from essentially burning out, that's also a very good idea.
Yeah, I've in the future, probably after Blood and Steel Saga's finished, I've got a sci-fi dystopia planned. I've got a sci-fi horror planned. I've got a horror duology planned. I've got a YA fantasy planned. So I like to throw everything everywhere all at once. But all of it kind of centers on grimdark.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't write a flowery sci-fi space opera. I couldn't do it. It's way too technical. But can I write sci-fi horror? Yes, because of the grimdark, because of the dark element.
Yeah.
I can write horror because of the grimdark element. I can write YA fantasy because of the fantasy element, and it's trying to connect all those dots together. But I wouldn't go out and try and write a romance, or I wouldn't write like Hilary Mantel or Andy McNabb or anyone like that. There'd be absolutely no point in me trying, because I'd fail miserably. Because
if it doesn't interest you either,
yeah,
you won't have that drive to write it. So you could come up with a fairly good idea for any of those genres, but if you don't have the love to write it, then it'll either be finished and be crap, or it'll be finished and or it won't be finished at all, really, because you just sit there staring at it going, why am I writing this?
And I'm a firm believer of, the more you read in the genre, the more comfortable you'll feel writing in it. And that is an absolute truth, because the two main genres I read are fantasy and sci-fi, and I've only recently started getting into more suspense horror books. I've started reading Stephen King, basically.
I have one of his books on my shelf, and that's just Fairy Tale. I don't know if any of his others would really...
I haven't got around to it. So far, I've read The Mist and The Institute, both of which I absolutely loved. And then I'm on holiday next month, and I'm going to read Under the Dome, which is a hefty book. Again, talking about, do you read bigger books because you write bigger books? In this case, yes, because that's about 980 pages.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's, I write towards what I read, and it's all kind of its own little self-sustaining cycle. I read a fantasy book, I get an idea, I write it, and then it publishes, and then everything else from there. But yeah, I like the fact that I'm excited about the fact in the future I get to write a lot of different genres, and that I can explore a little bit.
I'm looking forward to actually reading more of what you're coming out with, because, like I said earlier, I really enjoyed Crescent Moon, and it's not necessarily something I would lean towards, but I applied to be in your ARC team, I believe, and I read it before it released, and I did pick it up because I was like, oh, I know this author. Like, I've briefly tried before I actually read Fangs of War. I was like, well, I've tried the first chapter, I actually really enjoyed it, so I'm give it a try and see what happens. And I was pleasantly surprised, actually, at how much I did enjoy it, because philosophy does tend to go over my head. Like, I'm not always the brightest person in the world, but
it's a lot of it is bogged down in technical elements, and it's I struggle with a hell of a lot of it. And that's why I liked the fiction approaches that some writers use. I don't know when it was a couple of months before I wrote The Crescent Moon, I read Albert Camus's The Outsider. That is a book about a man who, his mother dies, and he doesn't feel any grief. He doesn't feel any grief, he doesn't feel any pain about it. He's literally completely careless about it. And then he ends up getting taken to court because he doesn't grieve. And they then think he's culpable. And he says, no, I just don't feel anything. I don't understand why I don't feel anything. Am I meant to feel something? And it's about our moral relationship with death, and it was quite poignant and it was quite deep. But it was just fascinating, absolutely fascinating how it was written. And so I thought, screw it, I like the meaning of life. Let's try it out. And
it turned out really well.
I think that it engages people better and it makes it more accessible and just more enjoyable, because people don't like getting bogged down in a big, deep philosophy text unless you're really into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just,
well, at the end of the day, reading is fun, and this sort of reading is fun. And when you're reading for class or research, you understand that what you're going to read is probably not going to be, not necessarily not enjoyable, but it's not going to, it might not necessarily inspire your creativeness. Especially if you're reading like philosophy, because philosophy is like how thinking. But to mix it with, like you did, the fantasy element, it brings it down to like a normal level.
Yes.
And include something that you can be like, oh, okay, this isn't real life, but I can relate.
Yes. Keeping it as separate as you can from making it real, because that's one of the things that I struggled with reading The Outsider, is that it was a court case and it was so real, and you had your jury, your judge, you had witnesses, you had all sorts, and it brought it so real life that I was kind of left a bit moribund afterwards, because I thought, I don't know how I feel about reading this. Whereas then if you detach it to just concepts, like you said, and you just you make it really wordy and whatever else, then there's not that engagement. You can't have that engagement because it doesn't activate the right bits in your brain to enjoy it. So you put it slap bang in the middle, and like you said, slightly detach it from reality, but have elements that you can relate to, and then that kind of creates its own little recipe for a philosophical tale.
Well, exactly. And it's another genre to add to your writing belt.
Yeah, it's a random genre, but why not?
But again, it's something different, isn't it? And I can't say that there are many fantasy grimdark authors that I've read from that I know have done such a 180 essentially into their writing style. A lot of people find what they like, or find what they can write, find what sells, and just stick with it. And I think that's probably another benefit of being indie, really, is that you can just, today I feel like writing this, or I finished this project, I'm a little bit burnt out from grimdark, I can write sci-fi or philosophy or anything, and you don't have someone going, we don't think it's going to sell, because it's not. Well, I don't know. It could be your main point.
No,
but for a publisher, obviously their point is to make money.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it's in the respect of authors will be almost told that they write in a certain genre. Your first series that you released was a fantasy series. Your next one should be a fantasy series, because those are the readers who have read your work, and so they'll like you. As a case of, maybe I don't want to. Too bad.
Because we know that you can sell it, essentially. Well, I mean, again, that's the joy of self-publishing. You are essentially your own publishing house, and if you want to write it, you can write it.
And it is a wonderful, wonderfully free and freeing way of writing. And I wouldn't have met some of the amazing people I've met. I wouldn't have, come into contact with and received the illustrations of some fantastic people. I wouldn't have opportunities like this. And yeah, it's just nice to have a lot of personal control over it, in ways that a traditionally published authors sadly wouldn't have as much of. And although there are pushes and pulls of that kind of thing, the freedom that you get from self-publishing is definitely a big pull for me personally.
It's very interesting. So we've spoken a lot about your books, so we're going to take a slight sidestep for our final part of the interview, and I'm just going to ask you some of your favorite things about books, one of which I've already mentioned. Your favorite trope? What is your favorite trope?
Right. My favorite, unsurprising to anyone who has read any of my books ever, as a matter of fact, it occupies 3/4 of the books I've currently written.
Mhm.
Revenge. I love a revenge story.
I
My
love revenge.
favorite fantasy book is Best Served Cold by
Right.
Jared Crombie.
Mhm.
And that is the pinnacle of a revenge story. That is someone who is thrown off a mountain, expected to die, and then is so angry that she goes and kills everyone who did it to her. And I cannot think of a better trope to have, because you just have, it's just angry and violent, and you just,
Anger.
it's such a believable motivation, because
Mhm.
people are driven by revenge. People are
Yes.
driven by getting a one up.
Yep.
And yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
It's very good, to be fair. I think it's one of my favorite. I also think, well, personally, some of my favorites are heists, magic schools, basically trials. If it's going to put a character through trial, like through a trial, whether that be like to get through school or whatever, I'm down. Like, I'll read the book because I absolutely love it. We've already said before we came onto this live that we both hate miscommunication. So if anyone watching
Absolutely
this
despise it.
also hates it, then you will be safe reading any of Ethan's books, because he has already said that he will not write it.
I flatly refuse.
Great.
Miscommunication, or characters who make choices that you're left gasping at because you have no idea what logical sense would be made in making that choice. I like real choices, and I like people to actually listen to each other, because that's how the real world works.
Well, I mean, I work with people, or I have worked with people, I should say, that don't listen to each other.
Yeah. I might be giving humanity a bit too much credit. But no, I will never write a miscommunication trope in any book that I ever write, and you can hold me on that one.
I will.
Yeah, that's never.
So I've just been recommended these two, and I will say that both of these books are on my never-ending TBR: Master of Sorrows and The Umbral Storm. I did not know they both had magic schools. I knew Master of Sorrows did, but I didn't know The Umbral Storm did. So they are moving up my TBR, which says something, because a lot of things are moving up. Special editions. Do you collect special editions?
If I can get it off my shelf.
Here is one I bought earlier. You do? Okay, so yes, this question will actually mean something to you.
This is my only special editions.
Right. So
these are the only
just
special
getting started.
I don't know about that. I can't financially. I do not have the finances to this.
None of us do.
They are a series I love. Would I then get every single book additional to that that I love in special edition? Probably not. Like the idea of getting The Shadows of the Apt, Agent Tchaikovsky's 10-book series, all in the Broken Binding special editions. I'm thinking of my wallet, not of my love for that series.
See, you sound way too sensible. Way too sensible, because that's not how I
got to buy barcodes and cover art and promotionals, and the numbers just add up. And
yeah, I will say that is probably the most adult thing I've heard in a while. I've got other things to think of.
21. I shouldn't be. This shouldn't be my book.
Maybe that's what I need to do. I don't think I could write. Well, no, I don't think I could write a book. Not a long one, anyways. But I need to do something like that to maybe like redirect my finances, and maybe my partner would be happier. Another book. Yes, of course, another book. Because this is what I spend my money on. But you still have seen special editions. You own a special edition. Do you have a favorite element of a special edition? So sprayed edges, end papers. If you had unlimited money to buy the special editions, what would be the thing that draws you in?
Hardcover books, an intricate naked cover.
Oh, so like foiling or printing.
Not necessarily. I love these books because of this.
Not sponsored. Not sponsored.
No, not sponsored. However, if you do read this series because of my recommendation, good job. No, because of this stuff. This is all like silver foiling and stuff like that on the cover, and I think it looks amazing. And yeah, I say that's probably my favorite element of the special edition. I don't really care about sprayed edges. I'm not one of the. I'm not. You know, if it's there, okay. If it's not,
Brilliant.
I'm not going to cry about it.
Yeah.
But having just a nice physical book that's slightly better than a normal hardcover, that's enough for me. That's fine by me.
I will say, Tufty, he's also with you. He's very selective about special editions. I will say I'm getting better at this. I don't buy every special edition that comes out now. There is a reason that I kind of close my eyes every time Broken Binding go, we've got another special edition, because I know I cannot afford it.
It's a lot of them. But
it is a lot of them.
Tufty has also mentioned the series of which contains my favourite fiction book of all time.
Which one's that?
Which is Children of Time.
Yes.
That is my favourite fiction book of all time.
Of all time.
All time.
Wow, that's pretty strong words. I was actually going to ask this, but Tufty's already said it. What kind of special edition for Fangs of War? So, what if you could have a special edition for the Fangs? What would you imagine it like? Money, no object, obviously.
I'm gonna give one answer, and that is weight.
Oh, please tell me this. Please tell me this is legit. Like,
weight. That's all I'm contractually allowed to say is weight.
Oh, but contractually means something. Oh, okay.
Weight.
Oh, it's gonna be another series where I have multiple editions. Do you collect multiple editions of books? I'm guessing not. If you're as head screwed on as you are, and crazy like I am.
I have accidentally collected multiple editions of the same series. In that I have the Tide Child trilogy in paperback that I'm trying to sell on, and obviously now I have special editions. And I also picked up original hardback editions of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Original hardbacks in a box in a charity shop for 12 quid.
Wow, pretty impressive to be fair.
Yeah. And so they're now on my shelf next to, or opposite to, the paperback editions that I got in the works for about £10. So those are accidental multiple editions. No, I only ever own one edition of the book, and I'd only ever buy a second edition to then replace an original edition that might have got a bit old or a bit dotty or whatever else.
You are too mature. Bearing in mind, I'm older than you. You are too mature. No. No, I do not. Do not relate.
It's the writing. It is the writing.
It is the writing. Oh, wait, not wait. Yeah. And also Lisa is...
Oh, yes. Hello, Lisa.
This is all because of what we're waiting for. On that note, I have taken up over an hour of your time. I hope you have enjoyed it.
That was been good. It's been good.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, it's been good.
Somewhat enjoyable. Do you want to plug yourself, where people can find you, where you can find your books? The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, books are on Amazon. They are also available on other online retailers, and you are able to request them in stores, especially in America. So anyone in America watching this, please request them in stores, because then they buy stock, and stock means money. So please.
Please, guys.
It's the best sales pitch I can give. I have 3 series on the go. One of them is grim, dark fairy tale retellings. They're novellas. There are going to be 5 of them. The other one is a philosophical fantasy trilogy about the meaning of life. And the other one is, as we spoke about today, a very big grim, dark series, which I'm very excited about. I'm currently writing a project of that. I've written another project of that, which is coming out next year. I have a few other plans for that as well, but again, I can't say a lot about it at the moment. And you can follow my newsletter, my socials. I'm on Instagram and Twitter and Threads. The readathon second half for the Horns of Grief starts on the 24th, as Chelsea has remembered, and I completely forgot. So thank you for mentioning that number. And it finishes on the 16th. Keep an eye out for the 16th, 17th, and 18th, because there will be an announcement.
Yes, which will be an amazing birthday present, because my birthday is on the 17th of September, So
Excellent.
all ties in really well.
Can't say what is going to be announced will be available at that time. However, nice present for you to get a new announcement on your birthday.
There you go. Happy birthday to me. So everyone who's watching this, past, present, future, make sure that you follow Ethan on all of his channels. If you like seeing me be chaotic and make authors also be chaotic with me, consider subscribing to this channel. In August, this is part of my Vida 2 content, so thank you very much, Ethan, for being here. I've uploaded every single day in the month of August, and I plan to upload for the rest of the month, despite, yeah, I know, it's crazy. I am...
It's incredible work, guys, so you should follow. This is dedication.
This is dedication. Thank you very much. Yeah, today's been stressful, but otherwise it's been fine. So yeah, make sure you subscribe if you want to. Otherwise, that is everything for this interview. Again, thank you very much, Ethan, for being here with me tonight and chatting about your books, and also letting me also co-host your readathon. It's been really, really fun, and I'm really enjoying the books, so I can't wait to get the sequel. But that is everything for today. I hope you guys will come back tomorrow maybe for the next video, which I think is my vlog. But otherwise, we'll catch you another time. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. And I have to